Hi, right then. So we've covered quite a lot of material already. We've spent a fair amount of time going through the bones of the skull and going through the blood vessels and the arterial and venous supply to the skull. And what we're going to start doing now is start to try and break down the nerves in the head and neck, because this can get quite heavy. So the first of these videos, and there's going to be a few of these now, okay? But the first of these videos is actually just a more general scheme of how the nervous system works, because I found in my experience that this is one of those things that nobody really understands properly. People always really struggle with this, okay? And the problem is that we start mentioning words like autonomic, parasympathetic, sympathetic right early in the medical degrees, and to be honest, most people start using them without really understanding exactly what they are for quite a long time. So, the way it works is this: is that the nervous system has thousands and thousands of anatomical divisions in it, okay, and it's broadly divided into the central nervous system, which is the brain and the spinal cord, okay, and the peripheral nervous system, which is all of the nerves coming from them and heading towards the peripheral tissues. Okay. Now, all of these things that we see, all of these peripheral nerves, okay, these are just masses of anatomical divisions, okay. But the thing that you have to really understand and get to grips with is the fact that any one anatomical division, any nerve that you take, right, any member of the brachial plexus or anything like that, any one of these anatomical divisions is actually just a sheath, okay, and it's containing millions of nerve fibers, okay. And if there's a sheath that's containing millions of nerve fibers, it's completely reasonable that some of them may have come from one place and be heading to do one function, whereas some of them might be heading for either to the same place or even going to deviate somewhere else for a different function. So what I'm saying is that within the same anatomical division, you might get functional divisions. Okay? Now, broadly speaking, the functions of the nervous system can be divided into two major areas, and we talk about the somatic nervous system and the autonomic nervous system. Okay? So the somatic nervous system includes the things that you're really conscious of. So, for example, sensation. I touch the computer there and I can feel it. You know, that's my somatic nerves being triggered. Or the fact that I'm moving my hands around and I can actually, I'm controlling this movement. Okay, this is my voluntary motor system. Okay, and these are functions of the somatic nervous system. Okay? But there's so many other functions that are happening as a result of, that you don't even think about at all, okay? Usually motor. And so, for example, we're talking about, how much light is coming into your eyes. Do you control your pupils? No, of course you don't. Do you control how fast your heart is beating or how hard it's beating? No, you don't. Okay? Now, these things are controlled by what we call the autonomic nervous system, and usually they have opposing functions. So, for example, you might find that one thing makes your heartbeat faster, one thing makes your heartbeat slower, one thing makes your pupils open wider, one thing makes your pupils close, okay? And because of these opposing general functions, okay, we divide the autonomic nervous system into what we call sympathetic and parasympathetic. Now, what I'm talking to you now about are functional divisions, okay? So within an anatomical division, be it the trigeminal nerve or be it the median nerve or whatever, it wouldn't be unreasonable at all for any one of these anatomical divisions to have some somatic function, which is voluntary sensation, maybe motor, that you understand or know about, okay, and to have some autonomic function, which is just controlling things that you don't really think about. Okay, so what we've got is the central and the peripheral nervous system. We've got our anatomical and functional divisions. We've got our somatic and our autonomic nervous system, and in our autonomic nervous system, broadly speaking, we tend to talk about the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. Okay, so that's what we're talking about. Now, the autonomic nervous system is the one that gives people a lot of trouble. Okay, and the only real major difference, apart from the general functionality of what the autonomic system does compared with the somatic system, is that with the nerves of the somatic system, when they come off, say, the spinal cord, they don't synapse at all until they get to their effector organs. So they come straight off the spinal cord, they go to where they need to go, and that's that, bang, done. Okay? Whereas with the autonomic nervous system, there's actually a little anatomical difference, which is that somewhere down the line, they will always have a synapse, okay? And the place that they will synapse is called a ganglion, okay? And that means that what you get, whereas with a somatic response, you'll have one neuron, okay, with an autonomic interaction. You'll have two neurons. You'll have a pre-ganglionic neuron and you'll have a post-ganglionic neuron. Yeah. Now, so far what we have is we've understood what it is that the somatic and autonomic nervous systems do. We've understood that there is actually a slight difference between them in terms of their structure, okay? Which is the fact that autonomic, be it sympathetic or parasympathetic, always have either a pre and post ganglionic neuron, and that the somatic ones don't have a ganglion, okay? When they come off the spinal cord or the brain. So, if that's the case, okay, what I can also tell you is that there's another slight difference, okay, between sympathetic and parasympathetic, and that's this, okay, that in the sympathetic system, the preganglionic neurons that come off, say, the spinal cord, okay, will always be quite short, okay, and the ganglion will be quite close to the spinal cord itself, okay, whereas with the parasympathetic system, usually you'll have a long preganglionic neuron, and it will be quite close to the effector organ, the ganglion where it synapses, and you'll end up with a short postganglionic neuron. Okay? So if I give you an example, let's have a look at this screen over here. Okay? This is just an image of the orbit from above. Okay, so we've taken off the frontal bone across here, so we can just see down into the muscles of the eye, and that's the eyeball, that's the optic nerve, the big white bit. Okay, and the reason why I point this out, okay, is only to point out this little thing here called the ciliary ganglion, which we might meet shortly anyway. Okay. Now this is just an example. I don't really want you to worry about the specifics of it just yet, but this is an example of a parasympathetic ganglion. Okay, this ganglion is near its effector organ. Okay, where things are actually going towards the ciliary muscles and towards the iris and the pupil. Okay, now that means that if the ganglion is there, that means that the flow of neural information has come from the central nervous system, and there's been a long preganglionic set of fibers. Okay, and they could have travelled in any one of these these anatomical divisions. They might have, at various points in their path, they may have mixed and matched and moved from different places. But this series of preganglionic neurons will then synapse at the ciliary ganglion. Okay, and there's then a short postganglionic neuron, which is going to the effector organ. Okay, so that's a good example of the parasympathetic system. Okay? Whereas compare the sympathetic system. Okay, now what I've done here is I've just basically taken a section of the spinal cord, just so that you understand how this works. Okay, this is the front, this is the back, so anterior, posterior. Okay, and I just want you to recognise that this is a typical spinal nerve coming off. Okay, and it's got anterior and posterior rootlets forming one spinal nerve. Okay. Now, the sympathetic system, okay, so these are spinal nerves coming off the spine, okay? The sympathetic nervous system has these sympathetic chains, okay? And these are chains of ganglia, all linked together, okay? So what we're really saying here is that the preganglionic neuron literally just comes off the spinal cord, and it just goes to one of these ganglia here. And then its postganglionic neuron, from that ganglia to wherever it goes, is going to be quite long, going all the way up to, wherever it is. And another thing about the sympathetic system, which is different to the parasympathetic system, is that for the sympathetic system, all of the sympathetic outflow, everything that is sympathetic in nature, okay, comes from an outflow tract from a spinal nerve somewhere between the level of T1 and L2, okay? So between that area, that's where the entire sympathetic outflow for the whole body comes from, okay? And they will synapse, the preganglionic neurons from there will synapse at one of these ganglia and then have a postganglionic neuron. Now, if we just look at that in a little bit more detail, okay? We saw our segment before, okay? We had our anterior bit and our posterior rootlets, okay? Now, what will happen for a typical bit of sympathetic outflow, if there's a sympathetic stimulus, okay, it will travel through here, okay, and it will basically, to get to the ganglion, okay, there may very well be, remember these are anatomical divisions, okay, there may very well be loads of somatic outflow, sensory things, motive things going on all the way across here, right, as well as your sympathetic function, okay, but you've got sympathetic function, which is a sympathetic impulse, which is going to come out here and then it just detours for a second to get to its ganglion. It does that through what's called a white ramus communicans, okay? White because it's white matter, okay, and white matter is myelinated, okay? Ramus just means a branch, so it's literally a branch there, and it's communicating, okay? It's communicating with the spinal nerve, okay? So we've got white ramus communicans. And at that point, that's where you get your preganglionic neuron synapsing with your postganglionic neuron, okay? Which will then re-enter the spinal nerve via a grey, unmyelinated ramus communicans, okay? And then you're back in, okay? And this dotted line is the postganglionic neuron. And what will then happen to it is it will go to wherever it needs to go, okay? Now, what you should know is that that preganglionic could synapse there, and then sort of like, and then your postganglionic could stay on the same level, you know, just the way that it did there. So this is basically a preganglionic and then a postganglionic staying in the same spinal nerve. Or you could find that the preganglionic synapse is there and the postganglionic goes up or down the chains, okay? Or, in fact, what you could even find is that a preganglionic neuron could actually extend all the way down, go up or down the chains itself, and then synapse with a postganglionic neuron, okay? So that's how the sympathetic system works. And that being the case, there is one extra fact that I'll put to you, okay? There's one extra fact, which is this, which is that in the head and neck, okay, the ganglia that control the sympathetic outflow, okay, where the pre- and postganglionic neurons meet, okay, are all based in three, instead of being in the chains, those ones that you saw just before, next to the vertebral column, are all based in three cervical ganglia, okay, superior, middle, and inferior cervical ganglia, which hang about in the neck. So your sympathetic outflow is still coming from T1 to L2. It's still coming from T1 to L2, but the neurons are synapsing up in these ganglia, okay? So be it that a preganglionic neuron is reaching all the way up to the, well, in fact, that is how it goes, that a preganglionic neuron will go all the way up to any one of these three ganglia, and then your postganglionic neurons will go from here towards the head and neck. So, if I just summarise that, that's actually, I know that that's a short video, but it's giving quite a lot of information. So, let me just quickly summarise that and make sure you've got it, okay? The central nervous system, the brain and the spinal cord, okay? The peripheral nervous system is all the nerves deviating from that. These are anatomical divisions, okay? Within each nerve fibre, there are functional divisions, okay? Functional divisions may be somatic, or they may be autonomic, okay? Autonomic nerves, autonomic function is usually one way or another. They're usually opposing functions, and we call them sympathetic or parasympathetic. And they each have a pre- and a postganglionic neuron, compared with a somatic nerve, which never does. Okay, and in the parasympathetic system is a long preganglionic neuron, and the ganglion is near the effector organ, and there's a short postganglionic neuron. Okay, whereas with the sympathetic, there's usually a relatively short preganglionic neuron and a long postganglionic neuron, and those the way things work is that the sympathetic ganglia are arranged in chains that are all connected, and therefore your preganglionic neurons can either come out and go up and down the chains themselves before they synapse, or they can synapse straight away, and your postganglionic neuron can go up and down the chains to wherever they need to go, and they will enter, both parasympathetic and sympathetic, they will enter various anatomical divisions to get to where they need to go. Alright? Hopefully, I really hope that helps to demystify how the nervous system works in general.